Okay, so I've got a lot of code here, and in order to save you some time, I want to first focus on the code that you're going to be most interested in. Let's look at square, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Random guess. So if the square is solved, do nothing. Otherwise, choose one item in possibilities to keep and remove all other elements. Okay, so this method does not return any value. It's going to take this variable possibilities, and it's going to, if it is not solved, it will choose a valid index and remove anything that is anything except for the element at that index. There are a number of ways to do it. The way that I would recommend is something like if this dot is solved, return. You don't need to do anything. Int index equals some valid index. Integer temp is equal to the integer at, I'm just going to say int I, and then say something like possibilities is equal to some new array list of integers. And then add temp to possibilities, some new empty. And notice this is pseudocode. Okay, so you're going to be interested in random guess. Get solution. So if the square is solved, return the item at index 0 from possibilities. So if this is solved, return the appropriate thing. And then you can just leave this return statement here, because if you return here, it'll never get to this line of code. You can have multiple return statements inside of a method, so you just have one line of code there that you need to implement. Remove. This can be implemented with one line of code just by returning the thing returned by the method that removes I from possibilities. And you've got to figure out what that method is, but all you really need is one line of code there, and then you can even get rid of this line of code. Is valid. You can do this one with a one line of code. Just return true if the size, actually just return the size of possibilities equals, well, is greater than 0. Is solved, return the size of possibilities is equal to 1. And so I'm giving you some pretty significant hints here. Most of these are just one-line methods, right? They shouldn't be too hard. If you're just a little bit creative, you can get rid of this return statement and just replace it with something that is sort of like this. You can get rid of this and just replace it with something that does this. Here you can get rid of this and replace it with something that does that. Here you can't just get rid of this line of code, but you can just add one line of code and get it done. Random guess is a little harder. It's also worth more points. In board, you're going to be interested in the isSolved method. So you're going to need a double for loop that passes through every square in my squares. If the square is not solved, return false. Now, if you get through that for loop and haven't returned false, then you can just return true. You can have a return statement in a for loop, and as soon as it hits that, if it actually returns false, it'll never get out and execute the return true, and that's just fine. Random guess, choose a random row, choose a random column, call the random guess method of the square in that row and column. Is valid is very much like is solved. It's going to have a double loop, for loop that passes through every square in my squares. If the square is not valid, it'll return false. If it gets outside of those loops, it'll return true. So those are all the methods that you have to implement. Those are my hints for implementing them. Shouldn't be too bad. If you remember the quiz stuff, for arrays and array lists, this should not be too hard. If you have some questions, I did have a video that reviews the quiz, and so if there were things that you didn't understand on the quiz, you can go through that video and hopefully it helps. For the solved class, now you don't have to implement anything here, but it might be useful to see a few things. So if I just run this real quick, and choose a file, it's just going to open that file and it lists all the possibilities for all the things, because we've just got stubs inside of square and board. As you implement the methods inside of square and board, it's going to change the behavior when you run your program. It will be useful for you to use print statements and print some information out to yourself on the console. that helps you to know when those methods are getting called and what they're doing. The other thing that might be helpful is in this solved class, in this run method, this is the algorithm that I showed in the pseudocode or in the other video, where you reduce main. Step 2, create a clone of main. Step 3, make a random guess. Step 4, reduce temp. Step 5, if temp is solved, we're done. Step 6, if temp is invalid, go to step 2. Step 7, well, go to step 3. So if we're not done, then we must not be solved. And so this looks a little bit different in the comments that I've put here, because when I made that video, I refined the comments from when I originally wrote the code. You don't need to change this method. You really shouldn't change this method, except that I have these two lines here. I've got a sleep 1000 and a sleep 300. You may find it useful to take the comments out of those lines there, and maybe this sleep 10. What that'll do is it will slow the program down. Now, it may not slow it down until you implement some of those methods. No, it's not, because it's never even going to go into these loops. But as you implement those other methods, this may slow down the program a little bit so that you can see what's happening. This number tells it how long it's going to pause. So you can adjust this number. If you want to make it go slower, make that number bigger. If you want to make it go faster, make the number smaller. You'll want to be careful with that. If you make it real slow, it's just you're gonna be sitting there staring at your program as it runs forever, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to spend all your time just watching this thing run. So you'll do a lot better if you spend a little more time just looking at your code and thinking about it and adding print statements. But if you want sort of a graphical, watch it slowly solve, that may help you a little bit. Aside from that, you really don't need to look at any of the other code in this application. I will probably tomorrow make another video that goes through that code in more detail for those who are curious. But just if you're trying to get the assignment done, after watching this video, you should have everything you need to complete this assignment. Good luck, have fun, and if you have any questions, please send me a message in Canvas. You will note that in my grading rubric, there are 130 points possible, but this assignment is only worth 80 points. So there's a lot of extra credit available. You don't have to get everything right in order to get full credit on the assignment. You just have to get most everything there for the majority of the methods. But it will not solve the Sudoku puzzle correctly unless you get them all exactly correct. And if you get this thing to solve every Sudoku puzzle, you will get 130 points. So that's a good bit of extra credit. Again, good luck, have fun, and if you have any questions at all, please send me a Canvas message. Thanks.